everybody. It is Cinnamon Cooney, your Art Sherpa, and I'm coming at you for a patron-only live. Had some news on this live. I think initially we were planning on making this an acrylic painting, and it probably still will be, but just due to everything that's going on and how much I'm having to paint right now to get ready for acrylic April, I just honestly couldn't stand on my feet anymore today because I've been on my feet all day. On the mic is my husband, John.
Hey guys.
He is helping me get through tonight by doing a couple really awesome things. One, he's making sure the stream is working, and he's also going to be running in and out, taking care of kids. So basically, this was going to be our first, and is going to be our first kind of like figure painting class. I'm going to do it in watercolor. Even if you don't paint in watercolor, I would really like to encourage you to stay, because I realized I'll just intro this into some just watercolor basics. You could do this following project. You don't have to buy the expensive watercolors that I have. You could probably just go get the one at Michael's and have just as much success and just as much fun and get the same information. That'll let me kind of like also get my head around this particular painting for later in acrylic, and it lets me get off my feet, which I really need to do. I hope I don't look as tired as I feel.
No, you don't look.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I like your hairs.
Do you like my hairs?
They're all red and they match your nails.
Yeah, my horse. So this wonderful reference image is a lot of fun. It's actually, I'll have to say, just like on an insider thing, it is really challenging to find reference photos of nudes that don't become, and I'm not prudish at all, but have the look and feel of pornography. Right? Like, because it's a really specific look and feel when something looks like it's a figure painting class or it comes from that type of work, and versus when it's for other stuff. And even on my really good site, and I would search specifically for figurative artist studio ones, and a lot of it was like, wow, that's just a whole bunch of stuff that doesn't actually fit into this. And what I'm basically saying is, generally in traditional figure drawing, if you've been able to take one of those classes, you know what I mean. If you haven't, here's what it basically is. So they have regular humans come in, and you get so long on each pose, you know, where you get warmed up and you kind of do some different poses. The poses are really just about being able to see line and form. Sometimes there's a seat if it's going to be a long session. And so this is actually very classical to what there's more humor here. Like normally there might not be such an expressive face or such an expressive pose. It might be a more relaxed pose, because to hold it sustainably for a really long period of time is very hard for the models, and they're expensive too. So like oftentimes, like one of the art students ends up being the model. I had a friend in art school who really loved to be the nude model. It was like his favorite thing, which was definitely an insight into his life. But I was not into it. But this is very classical to that, and you know, I would say going online and finding these is like definitely a challenge, but I will try to do more of these, and I will try to get us more into maybe some of the figure painting classes. Now, on to the watercolor. Now that I have expressed that thought about figure painting, I'm taping up my reference so I can see it, because if I can't see it, I'm not going to be able to paint it. All right, and I'm going to use this because this is an example page that I've had from before, and I'm going to pull out this here. Is pan watercolor. So watercolor, the way most people are familiar with it, comes in a little round shape or square shape, these half pans. The half pans are nice because when you run out, you can pull this little piece of plastic out and refill, you know, put a fresh one in that you buy from the company. Or if you have this color paint in the tube, right, which is this style of watercolor. And I know this is going to seem ridiculously small to you at first, but actually this is just a lot of watercolor here, right here. Watercolor goes a very long way. I've had this set for so long, man, years now. What, 2 years, John, on this set? And I recently got this set from Senlier. I've had the Daniel Smith stuff. I can't even, like, companies will be like, can we send you some more? And I'm like, yeah, I'm good. I'm full up. I have more watercolor in my bucket that I'm going to be able to finish. So on the watercolor, when you're thinking prices, this is like a tube of acrylic like this. So it's just a lot more paint. It just, you just kind of have to recalibrate your size and everything to what you're seeing. I'm going to work these pans tonight just to get them going. A thing you might not know, if you have pans, and this is whether you're painting with your kids, doing like the really inexpensive, Crayola pans or Artist Loft pans or good pans, it can be nice to take like a pipette or brush and prime each little one with a drop of water. Because now this particular one here is bound with honey, but they have very water soluble binders. And when you do this, what happens is it'll let you get a richer, deeper color. Right? And then it's nice and fussy because it drops it in there. There's a bunch of colors that I like in watercolor, but basically what I'll say is the colors are, in their very nature, super transparent. So you can get to a muddy watercolor, but it's a bigger journey. Now, I'm not saying that you can't. You totally can. Watercolor brushes are softer than the acrylic brushes. You can get a synthetic. I prefer, I don't have any Escodas in, but I really love Escodas. There's some Princeton, there's some Raphael I like, but I really like the black velvet. Okay, this has nothing to do with my relationship with the brush company. I just really like the black velvet. I always have. Many watercolors do. I like the number 8 round because I can pretty much do anything I need with just one brush. Now in watercolor, I say this all the time, but if you've never heard of this, the pigment goes where the water is. So if the paper is wet, and I'm going to wet the paper, correctly wet paper is damp enough to move the paint, but not so wet, I like to say, that fish can swim in it. So if I come here with my ultramarine, what you're going to see is that it blends and bleeds out into the area of the water, but it's not going to go past that. Whereas if I come through here, you can see it goes very crisply with where my brush is, right? In watercolor, we're always kind of playing the hard edge versus the soft edge. And the best of the watercolorists are masters of this. They're really great at, so like if I'm doing leaves, right, and we're just making little leaf shapes, as you do in watercolor for fun, right? These are lovely, wonderful little leaves, right? And if I had those going on, I would want to balance them with very soft, diffused shapes. And this is just kind of a random little example. So you can see that where the water is where the pigment goes. It's just the best way of explaining it. So some water tends to travel a little bit more, and some water tends to be tighter. Generally, you'll find Japanese companies have what is considered a tighter watercolor. In other words, it doesn't bloom as big. American companies and French companies, they will have much more of a bloom in their watercolor. You can create a bloom with something called oxgall. So it's not like you're limited in getting it. You do need quality paper. I usually paint on a watercolor block. If you're in group with me, you've done a few of these. What's important to know about it is it needs to be 140 pound. And it needs to say watercolor. It's really nice. If it is sealed in a block, this is loose sheet because that's just what I have today because the blocks are all currently in projects. But the heavier the paper, the more it will stand up against the different water techniques. The other thing you have to have a paper towel.
There's celebration for watercolor.
Oh, is there?
Yes.
I was hoping everyone was going to be really forgiving of it.
Many yays for watercolor.
Now, in watercolor, they have a lot of different kind of tools to do this, and these are Neo 2s. Crandosh.
I'm gonna go for a walk here. I'll be back.
A really tremendous company, and they make a great watercolor pencil, which you can use right over any of your watercolor stuff. And what's great about this is I can put it on my paper, and I'll show you. And if I come back, I can reactivate it with a brush very easily. So it's a wonderful tool because you can get a nice hard line. But if I wanted to come in here, I could come in very, very soft and take this pencil right over here, and it will pull the watercolor off. The Neo 2s are not dissimilar. So it's like basically watercolor pigment in a crayon shape. Neo 2, fancy word for watercolor pigment in a crayon shape. And honestly, this is really all about your mood. You're literally like, do I feel like a tube today? Do I feel like a half pen today? Do I feel like pencils today? Do I feel like crayons today? Do I feel like all of them today because I'm just so full of whimsy? Oh, and it also comes in powdered and sheet form. This one? Okay, isn't this cool? It's my Neo 2 box. I don't know. It's by Smokezilla. This is for cigarettes, which happen to be the size of Neo 2 watercolors. Cigarette case is a really good crayon case. Just in general. I'm not smoking, so I might as well use that. There's also liquid watercolors like Doc Martens. I'll tell you something on the liquid watercolors. The profit margins in those are by far the highest. That's where you're giving up your biggest dollar value overall is to the liquid watercolors. So many people are just crazy about them. And, hey, if that's your deal, that's great. I'll tell you right now, I'm going to come in here and show you some more. Like, you can see how it travels down through this. But yet, doesn't here. The other thing that we can do is a thing called glazing, which means I can take a color over a dry color and it transparently shines through. So the other things that you'll be familiar with, dry brushing, you can dry brush in watercolor. You can use palette knives in watercolor. It's kind of interesting when you do it. There's a whole ton of mediums. The most difficult product in watercolor is liquid frisket, which I stopped demoing on my beginner watercolor classes because the thing about frisket is it has to go on dry and it has to come off dry, and it's not allowed to sit on the paper for a really long time. So that's a very hard thing to demonstrate, but what it does is it keeps your paper white because you don't have any white paint in your watercolor. The white is your paper. So if you need an area that's white or very light, you have to do that through the watercolor. The other thing is you want to work from light to dark. So that's kind of a crash course in watercolor, and we're going to work on our little figure painting of, I think we've all decided that she is Bertie. John has put into your dashboards both the traceable and the reference, because you'll have a better time with this if you use the traceable or the reference, unless you're really confident in your figure drawing. And we can do, like, I probably will do in group after we finish the unicorn, some of my, like, process on how I draw figures. It's not like super genius like Holgarth. It's just, I just do that, and I clearly keep drawing people. I don't even consider myself a figurative artist in that way, but I do it a lot, so clearly it's a thing. Now, this is tracing paper. You could print out your traceable. You actually, in this particular case, do use pencil on the back, not something else, not Ceril, not carbon, not other things. Pencil is great because pencil can be erased. And in watercolor, even pencil marks are actually really kind of allowed. So I'm going to go ahead and transfer her. And if John's here, and I don't know if he is, because I don't hear him. John, are you here? Nope, he's not here. So here's the deal, guys. I can't see the chat. I don't know how entertaining that will be for anybody. I can't see it at all. So I'm gonna have to guess what you're saying. Oh, I went big with the eye. Oh my gosh, guys, I'm so tired. If I make it through this prep for Acrylic April, I will be the toughest art teacher that was ever an art teacher anywhere in the known universe. I will tell you that right now. Just woo. So much. And then there's this thing where I get really pig-headed. It's the only way you can do the kind of stuff that we do. You have to be kind of pig-headed to, I don't know, decide you're going to teach online for free around the world. Uh-oh. So something happened there that's very bad is that the sketch moved, and that really is the worst. And I can never seem to reset my sketch well, so I'm going to, just for the purposes of not being stuck here all day, I'm going to get a new sheet. I will save that paper for something else later, and I'm going to affix this down much better this time. John, are you here? I can't see chat, and I told them where their stuff was, and I've already messed up the sketch once, so woohoo me. Oh, you didn't do it yet? I told him you did it. I wrote a check, and you got to cash it now. I'm going to tape this down just a little bit more. You just don't want your tracing paper to move for any reason. It just ruins the whole process or product. So now I'm going to stretch the tracing paper. On loose sheet watercolor, one of the things that you can do is stretch it. I actually do know how to properly stretch watercolor. I learned with watercolor first. Acrylic came much later in my life. My mom painted acrylic. And so I think I naturally gravitated to watercolor as an immediate, more transportable medium. And didn't get into acrylic until maybe art school, really effectively. You know, so I used to consider myself much more of a watercolorist and charcoal artist than acrylic artist. But that certainly has changed, hasn't it? You know, I'm glad I didn't take on oils. You know, when I first got on YouTube, I didn't think I would be able to because I was like, you know, I'm not really like, I know a lot about the product. I know a lot about the companies. I know a lot about the process and everything, but not what I would consider enough to teach. Like, even though I didn't consider myself an acrylic artist, I knew enough about acrylic to teach it. And so I was able to do classes, same with watercolor. But with oils, I never felt confident in, like, that I should teach those. And then I saw it was out there, and I was like, oh, well, I could have totally taught if this was going to be the benchmark of how we were going to explain oils to people. Like, the terrible information that's out there. Just crazy. There's a few good places. But I would say that it is very important to find someone to teach you, especially if you're, you know, starting out on the basics of something, that have just a good knowledge of it. Because you're going to come up with questions and issues that requires experience, in my opinion. I'm working my hands. I love hands. I love hands. I really wish I was more of a master of the Deadpool hand style. But I have never really nailed curvy fingers. I'm going to take it on really soon because they're something I really want to be able to do. So you can see we're just getting her contour lines in. So everything about this drawing is really just about the contour lines of Bertie. Let's call her Bertie. And, you know, these are about these sort of little outward lines that create the shape and form of a figure or object within your painting. Do we have any questions, sir? I don't know if we... Yes, I know we need to do this in acrylic. I know everybody wants to do this in acrylic. And again, thank you for putting up with me today, because I didn't want to bump her again, and I didn't want to bump the class again. And I know we already have a really good watercolor up there right now, the 4 little landscape watercolors that are coming out. That actually ended up being kind of a cool bonus because I am doing another class with Tamara, and this one doesn't have to be exclusive to that program, so I could give it to you guys and also her project. She does a Save the Planet project every year. And I like living here, so I said I would help save the planet in whatever way I could. Because I'm very fond of planet Earth. I don't really know where else I would live or what else I would do rather than be here. That's just me. I'm going to just kind of get this down here, some contour lines. I'll probably maybe sketch this a little bit more thoroughly once I get the traceable off. Let's see how I did. I'll make up for whatever I didn't have. Ah, did okay. I did all right. So you see, that's not a particularly dark drawing, right? Generally, these are not dark. And you can work straight from these light sketches. I'm going to go ahead and pencil refine this in. Just because sometimes in the tracing, you lose a lot of the original sketch, I think. I feel like a lot of times when I do an image and then I come back and refine the image, it's a little bit closer to what I originally put out there. Because I tend to be a little whimsical. I don't know if you all have noticed this. A little bit whimsical in what I'm doing. So, what's wonderful about watercolor is it's perfectly acceptable to include the pencil marks as part of the art composition. So you can actually do quite a lot of this in pencil and then go over in watercolor. The only thing to think about in that is that sometimes the graphite will move on you. There's a really cool thing going on right now with Senlier where they are definitively answering what varnish and how to varnish watercolor pieces. And this is very new. When I was doing watercolor, you wouldn't varnish a watercolor. That would be a silly thing to do. You put watercolor behind glass. That is how you stabilize it and protect it and keep it going. But now people are varnishing. So, oh, I lost a bit of the hand, so I'll have to put it back in. I'm going to tell you right now, hands, I like the paddle. That's this shape right here. If I can get my paddle in, then I can always get the hand in. So if off the paddle, I'm going to take a thumb and I'm going to bend it back and join it in. And then we're going to add some fingers. This part of the paddle is always the knuckles, and it just kind of helps me keep the hand in my mind. I didn't ever have an art teacher call it a paddle. I think that's just something I did at one point in class to help myself with the misery that is hands. Now I like hands, but I didn't used to like them at all. At all. They were not my favorite. So you can see I'm refining the sketch. Let's put this paddle in again. I feel like this hand got a little bit less than elegant. There. I like that knuckle. I like that little pop I did on that finger. That was really good. And then I kind of do like these longer squared fingers. It's just... So what it is actually, when we're doing hands, we feel a lot of pressure because we have this really, oh, hands, you know, they've got to be like really perfect. What I've learned is they really don't. Like everything else, our brain finishes the pictures for us. I really like this part right here. Because there's like no belly button. I think that's super realistic. Makes me super happy. I'm going to do this. Part of her foot is tucked behind folds of fabric, and we're going to have to sort of sketch in the folds of fabric, I think. Sometimes it's nice if you're going to do a figure painting or if you're going to do a painting is to do it in different media to kind of get a sense of it. Do studies. I mean, artists used to do studies all the time and they like it. Now, let's see. So she's got a bit of fabric coming down here, folds in, comes out here, another fold, coming around. That's got a fold there. And then let's say off the knee about here. Switch back. That's how fabric folds. What was that, John? Is there a storm going on? It has been crazy today. Something just went super bang, too. That was really kind of scary. If I go away, that's what happened, right? I'm going to kind of talk about another little fold here. Watercolor is also a good way to study the folds of fabrics. I know folds of fabric seem like the worst. I mean, I guess in some sense they are, but that's really more about them being visually busy in the same way rose petals are visually busy. So they can kind of overwhelm our process. You know, there we go. Let's put another little... We'll be very general about her drape. So that's really terrific. I'm pretty happy with that. I guess I got to paint her in, right? And then I have to make a decision about how I want to create some skin tones. You know, because skin tones are... This is a little porcelain mixer for watercolor. And I'm going to just grab it so you can kind of see me do this. Now, lots of ways to get there, but, you know, I think this is a quinacridone red. We're all familiar with red, right, as being part of a skin tone. And then we know that there's a bit of yellow into that, right? Getting into that. And then, you know, get some brown into our skin tone. And then I would say a little more yellow. Maybe some magenta. And so somewhere in here, and this doesn't look like it would be right? Doesn't seem like it would be at all, correct? But I'm going to rinse out some of this. I'm going to pull it a little more into some reds. So I have lots and lots. I'm going to take this brush, and what you're going to see me do is get... So with the brush, there's heavily loaded brush, and when you're trying to control your pigment, so like I pulled a lot of pigment in here. If I want to get some out but not all out, I do a gentle swish and a drag off, and that leaves me a very light amount of pigment. So that's one of the ways that I control the pigment in the brush. The other way is with paper towels. Just something you might not know. Huh? Hi! Thank you for everything, Bonnie. Bonnie? Hi, Bonnie. Let me come here. So we've got shadows and stuff. I gotta kind of decide if I'm happy with my little skin tones there. Often it's good to kind of begin with the lighter colors. You know, I know I've got a shadow there. Front of the knee will have more of a shadow. And I know coming in the calf we will. And so even though I know these are going to be deeper, darker values at a later date, I can come here and be like, ooh, where do I want to hold that light? And I like this sort of sketchy, loose way that you can get with watercolor. Now, with shadows, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be using probably a combination of ultramarine, and Payne's Gray is how I'll deal with like my like in-depth shadow. So I would just come along here and just put a very soft shadow. I want to do this while the paper is still wet and the paint is still traveling. Very much, that's when I want to do it. Otherwise, I won't get the softness that I want to have there. Now, as it's traveling up, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back. I'm going to vigorously rinse out my brush, come back and pull off some water, and then I just soften the transition between the two zones. Okay, just soften the transition. Watercolor lightens a lot, like a lot. I'm going to get some more Quinn. I'm here and maybe come under the knee. So a lot of times you'll be like, oh, that's too dark, or that feels overwhelming to your sensibility. And then later, when you go back and look at it, you're like, wow, that just got right where it needed to be. And so don't get too worried about every little thing. A nice little shadow comes across her leg. One of the things that's great about her is that she's got very smooth planes, even though she's plus size, but her planes are very smooth. So when she lights in a way that's easy to see, if that makes sense. Back into that shadow color that we talked about, our Payne's Gray, and then come under here, you know, and then let's kind of accentuate that shin shadow that's going on. I know I've got this, and I will shade her toes a bit under her ankle. Just playfully. You know, again, and you just get little bits of, basically when you're doing skin tones on somebody that's Caucasian, it's just peaches. Lots and lots of peaches. I often like to have yellow ochre, but it's in no way necessary. Preferable, but not necessary. You know, and I may let the part of that foot be a little bit light. And you can see I've just got that nice little peached area. And then if I want to get back into a little shadow, I can come here and I'll say is that her foot, to me, would be a little bit cooler and further away. And again, this does help me see the figure for when I want to paint it later. If I do a charcoal study, I do better. If I do a pencil study, I do better. If I do a watercolor study, I do better with the final painting that I do end up doing. It's, you know, kind of always helpful. So just come here. I like the redness on the knees. Bring that down here. Just getting a, again, very light color. And you can just leave the white where you want the white. I'm going to come back with a little red. You can blush anything very easily. Like, so if I want to blush just the underside of the foot a bit, I can do that. That's really actually quite charming. I really love watercolor as a medium. I do. When it's real rough and I am feeling really raw and lost, this is often my go-to medium. Acrylic asks a lot of us, doesn't it? It really takes us through it. And except when we're, you know, maybe in a daily painting or something, it's really requiring a lot of us where I feel like watercolor asks nothing of me and gives everything. And then you think, you should have a whole channel on watercolor. Ah, soon. I just have to get through what I'm doing for Acrylic April, and then it will all be on like Donkey Kong. You guys will probably get an early peek at what's happening with Acrylic April because you're going to help. You don't know that you're going to help me, but you're going to help me put y'all to work. I'm going to come in with my Payne's Gray and Ultramarine blue mixture and just make sure that this line here is a little bit more kind of thought out. And I'm actually enjoying this combo of colors very much. Just like very, very, very much. All the way. I'm going to get back into this. And there's some of this little pink there, which I think is a magenta. And I may bring some magenta over here. Never hurts to have a little quinacridone magenta around, does it? Notice this hot mess here. This is all, I can let it dry and I can paint with it later. And all of it is always good. I never get rid of it. It's very rare that I will wash out my trays.
Now, here's I'm gonna jump in here as a husband and say, this is one of those things where you're walking along and you see a dirty paint dish and you washed out. Don't really know that was a whole bunch of money in watercolor you just washed away. Just no idea. So, just gonna say,
marriage problems.
you know, be aware this could happen.
It could happen to you. Beware.
So I'm gonna go back to my regularly scheduled organization.
I'm not a yeller. It's okay. All right. I was like waiting for the argument. Meh. He's like, no, I want to sleep tonight. I'm not going to argue. Just kind of shading our breasts as they kind of come up and a little bit there. Now, what you see me doing is I'm rinsing out here, right? And I can drag off. If I don't vigorously swish my brush, there is pigment left in it, and I know that, and so I will constantly work. She's really pretty. I'm very much liking her back into my shadow color. Very much like her. I'll take that back. I want it to look like a shadow. Looks quite lovely. So where watercolors like get into trouble the way that acrylic artists can get into trouble is they overwork an area of paper. They continue to paint it and lift it and paint it and lift it and paint it and lift it, and the surface of the paper becomes damaged. And that is like, you'll talk about watercolors when it was really overworked. Now, some artists like lean into that. They're like very excited about the fact that it is overworked. And they almost make that a style. And that is allowed. It is allowed. Just add some like little shadow under these fingers here. That'll help kind of define that. I like that right there. Very much, I do. And again, you can see the difference where the water is, it kind of blends and flows, and where it isn't, it's very sharp, the brush. So I actually have to sort of soften this after the fact to get it to be how I want it to be. I'm going to come here, pulling this down, and then I'm going to come back. I have to make some more of my shadow color, which again, Payne's Gray, Ultramarine Blue. I know that probably seems like overkill. Because Payne's Gray has already got kind of a blue cast. I just find that the two of them work really well in tandem together, especially in watercolor. So, yeah, that's what you'll see. And when watercolors get overworked, then they can take on the appearance of being muddy. And you'll see a lot of artists really kind of struggle with that. But don't we just, as artists, struggle all the time anyways? Let's just be honest, we do. I need to bring out a soft shadow right here. I don't want it to be too much. But I do want to have it here. Yeah. This is just sort of that kind of shading at her side. Oh, she's looking so nice. I very much like how she looks. I don't know where John is. So if you have questions, I have no idea how to answer them. He will probably be back in short order. Now I'm going to come back with my brush, and you saw me sort of get it on my towel. That pulls all the water out of the brush so that I can come back and vacuum it up with the toe of my brush. Very important thing that watercolor does is that, and I'm very, very fond of it. I'm liking that so much. So, yes, I know this is an acrylic, and I really appreciate you guys being understanding about that, because I've got to film several videos a day right now, and you'll see it in April why I had to do that, and I'm trying to make sure that it's very much a daily process for me. So, and then it's on top of whatever my regular work is. So if I have meetings with you guys, you know, we still kind of go. If I have anything to do on the channel, we're still going to kind of do that on the channel. I'm going to make a very light kind of wash. So I'm leaving some pigment in. I'll leave some white maybe a few places, but I do want there to be, you know, a little pigment here. Now I'm going to pick up. I'm going to soften this and pick up. I will leave that little white spot at the elbow. And come here, and you can see that this is very light. I'm coming over the hand, and I'm glazing it very light. These are light pigment choices, and where I need to soften the shadows under her breast, I just come back over and hit that. I'm just grabbing that crazy skin color. I feel like in painting, the easiest of the skin variants is probably in watercolor. But the medium just makes itself easy to certain subject matters, and definitely painting in watercolor, water is easier than you think. I'm going to just come there. I need to soften. I need to kind of pick this up, actually. I need to push that back to the other side where I would want that shadow to be. There we go. Softening it. I want it there, but I just need it softer than what it is. A little bit on that hand, down that finger. So I'm just looking to shade some of that. If I get too much going, you can see I just come here and pick up. And I have to be careful. If I go too much into that, what will happen? It'll get muddy on me. And if I don't want it to get muddy, I've got to watch for that. Add a little pink to her elbow. And I'm going to come here and add a bit of the pink to her fingers very carefully. And I've got to be careful with this process. I'm going to take that pinkish color up into the knuckle. I'm going to add it to the thumb, just right there on her hands where they're just a little bit pinked. Grab some of that quin right there. Pinking it up. So that's really pink, right? Two things will happen. One, it's going to lighten, so that's not going to be such a big deal. And two, I'm going to come here and pick some of it up with my brush. I'm about running out of times I can do that. So, all right. Let's add a little bit of that right there. Maybe come back and pick that up a bit. So these little bits of blush are real fun for me, I think. I think they add a lot of personality to what is going on and make for what is a delightful painting. In my opinion, in my humble opinion, I'm going to come back in with my shadow color. I don't know if anybody has any questions. Try to add a bit of the shadow under the fingers. I think that really helps kind of ground everything. And then right here I can come back and add a bit of a crisper shadow there, because there is one. Here at the crease there's one. There is one here. It's okay to put in a little shadow kind of at the wrist area, because there's a wrist bone and it gets a little shadow going. To this hand, I've got to figure out, working my hand again, taking my pink, get some pink. Down here, get some pink. Get some pink. Put that pink on the fingers. I need to soften that pink. A little bit of wetness on my brush and softening that pink a bit. And also working on those fingers some. I'm going to just take my brush, and it's like just a very soft little circular motion. If you get too much water in there, you just come in and vacuum it up. Back into my shadow color. Tapping the brush up and down. I just want to strengthen that shadow. I'm going to strengthen it under the arm here. So that's just getting a little bit better and a little bit stronger, and it's playful. Bring some of my magenta into this. We have a lot going on the face, and I want to make sure I'm ready for that. I'm going to come here and work along the hairline. Now, when you're doing the face, you've just got to think about contouring. Honestly, if you think about makeup contouring, sometimes it's super helpful. Because think about where your makeup palette, if you have one, if you're with me today and you have one, you might not be using makeup recently, and so you might not be going at contouring. But if you think about where it asks you to leave highlights and where it asks you to put shadows, that can sometimes help you in painting a face in, which is, in my opinion, a lot easier to do sometimes in watercolor than in a lot of other kind of media. Bring this around here. Very, very light, right? Just the small bit of contouring that you got in. Pull up all the pigment that you can. And you do want it to kind of stay along here. It's nice for it to be wet because that way everything will diffuse out. And you do want it to diffuse out. So I'm going to diffuse. There's kind of like a darker value along the hairline, right? Then I'm going to take this and I'm going to come to the outside edge of the eye. There's going to be a little bit of a darker value here. Definitely going to add some to the ear. Right? Little too much there, so I just come back. Now, under the nose, there will be a bit of a shadow. And I'll have to get it in there, but got to be really careful about when I add it. So while I've got this all going, I'm going to come here and kind of take the tip of my brush and add a little more of that kind of colorant to the side. I see I'm moving increments, right? There's a lot there, so take a brush and very gently kind of curve that in, right? So it just helps pull that into that space. Now I can get back into my shadow color. And there is a distinctive little shadow under the nose. That's fantastic, and I need that. I'm very excited that that's there. I can have one kind of nicely worked out at the lids. Just coming on the toe of the brush, adding these like little hard little shadows to the piece. So you sort of see where it's developing. I like to say that watercolor develops. You know, more than anything, watercolor develops. I'm bringing a little of that shadow around the side of the nose. Oh my gosh, just kissing the inside. And that's all I'm going to say about that with that shadow. I'm not going to continue to talk about that at all. Anyway. Now, inside her eyes, right? we've got kind of a nice brown eye going on, but I'm going to need to kind of make sure that they're not bright white. So what you're seeing me do here is just make sure that the whites of her eyes are not bright white, because that is not going to help any of us. You know what I mean? But this is not going to do any of us any good. I am quite looking forward to her hair, and if you'll notice, I'm going to go get her all of the hair wet on the toe of the brush, bringing that around. And the mass form of the hair that I have, right? Like, see that there? That's very, very wet. I'm not going into her skin at all or anything. And I think I'm going to grab that transparent brown oxide. I think that's a good base for her hair. And where her hair would have more shadow, I'm going to just touch this pigment and let it kind of work its way out. That's all I'm going to do. And you can see it does quite a bit of work before I ever get there. When I come to the ends, I'm going to just sort of wiggle the brush, creating delicate little lines that are exaggerating these hair puffs. It's just like, wait, where'd that hair come from? Came from right there. It's just fantastic, right? Are they enjoying that? I really like the hair puffs. John, are they enjoying the hair puffs? Oh, yeah. I can hear your mouse moving, but I don't know what's going on. Oh, thank you. I got that on Etsy. From an Italian company. I have a bunch of really cool watercolor things that I have from Etsy that I just grabbed and purchased and have loved, loved, loved. They don't always make the show. Because again, you can see I can get these delicate little hairs along her face because the watercolor goes where the water is. And so it's really easy then, right? To piece out, and I'm just kind of going crazy now. Little bits of that. It's just crazy easy. We're going to just dance along the toe. I really live on the toe of my watercolor brushes. Just kind of traveling along the toe. I'm going to come here and do similar work that I did in the other one, making little sort of flyaway little hair things. I think that looks lovely. What do you guys think? Now, I'm going to grab a little of my my favorite yellow, which is the one from the Core palette, and I'm going to come in and start her eyes with it. I'm going to start her eyes with it. And I'm going to lift up. You can see I pulled back some of that, and that was really helpful in catching that. I've got to let that have a dry. I've got to let that have a little rest. I may come into the hair with a little bit of that nickel azo yellow because that particular color pushes against other pigment. And so sometimes you can work it even in hair or in places that are you would think essentially darker, but it pushes, it moves back. You can see it kind of moves back that pigment. And so it can give you some really tremendously cool effects, even after you laid, some paint down. And I think touching that with just a little of that is really terrific. And then I'm going to come in and I'm going to get some of my Pyrrole Orange. And I want to kind of take that orange in the hair even further, if that makes sense. And there's elements of this I can just do in this medium that I can't do in any other medium. And I really I like it. I like it so much. I like it so much. And I help put some orange there too. There's just no way to not give that a go, right? I think for the mouth, I'm probably going to stay in one of the Quin Reds or a magenta red. That's just going to make me happier in the result. I will take it over to my palette and kind of mix it. And I want to make sure that the first bit of color isn't overwhelming. So her top lip will be kind of exaggerated. But I've got to make sure that I'm not overworking the paper. So we'll start there. It's a good beginning, right? You guys kind of tripping out on how nicely that's going? So while all this is having a thought, I'm going to come in and come under the leg, which is now dry. And as long as I am careful with my brush, and again, this brush, Black Velvet, number 8. It's a great brush. There are other good brushes. This is just the one that I love. And next year, maybe I'll love another brush. Depends on what I find at the art store, if you know what I mean. So as I'm coming there, I'm going to get into, I think in my blanket, I'm going to definitely do, trying to decide if I want to, what kind of green I want to do. So I'm going to grab my nickel Azo and I'm going to come here and, so I'm taking my nickel yellow Azo, which is just a very bright yellow, bright warm yellow, and I'm going to come under here. You saw me do that. Not the deep runoff, right? Not that one. The one that was, I'm removing some pigment, but not all pigment, right? I'll come here. I will leave some white in the fabric, for sure. Now I'm going to get right into my phthalo. Just pull some shadow into the folds of the fabric. With the watercolor, I get to sort of like let some of it happen if I so choose. Just playful. You know, what would happen if I brought some phthalo blue into it? Right underneath there, phthalo blue. Now the core does the biggest bloom without an additive. I would say that the Senlier has some bloom, but a much more controlled one. The core has the biggest on the market without adding, you know, a agent to it. That's looking pretty cool because there's a nice shadow under where she is. Sometimes you come back where there's an area, and I can still come back again after this is dry and do glazing over this, right? So it's very powerful. I'll just take my, got my nickel azo over here with my phthalo, and I'll come between the legs, and I can come back with a little blue. Who is enjoying this? I think this is actually a really pretty piece. I am enjoying this. Let's fold this through here. And I'm going to just sometimes I like to carve out little elements, little bits that speak to me. Kind of fun. I'll just bring some of this around here more fully. And then I can darken it in a minute. Now there's a little bend in my paper starting to happen just now that I have to think about. It's not terrible. You can see I can glaze right over these areas. Putting pigment at a lighter value of pigment. I probably won't remove like that white over there and this over here. Probably won't remove it at all. I'm going to come in with some phthalo blue right here between the legs. And that's just because that area under her is just darker. Come along this leg better. Isn't it wonderful that the pigment only goes where the water is? Moments like that where I'm like, oh, yeah, the pigment only goes where the water is. Kind of looking rather playful and interesting, isn't it? Now, while I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and pull some of my Payne's Gray out. I'm going to get some on the tip of my brush, but I'm going to do so quite carefully. And I'm going to come into the eye. Really hoping that I see well enough to do this today. Start to lay in the pupil. A bit of a shadow under the eye. Or it's just a little shaded. Really not, you know, that's just sort of what you do there. Hopefully that's freaking interesting. And again, thank you guys. I will do this in acrylic. I just tired on my feet. I'm just painting all the acrylic paintings that I can paint. So just added an extra little layer of color so that her lip was a little bit poutier and, you know, that was kind of worked out. I'm going to grab some of this phthalo blue here. And I'm going to come along the front of the leg. And then there's a nice little structure. It sort of folds back here, comes forward and down. There we go. Yep. My reference. Don't go anywhere, reference. What I can't see, I can't paint. I like that. How is everyone doing with class, John? Yeah? They don't mind? Yay! If you haven't checked out the 4 Easy Landscape watercolor, please do. That was uploaded this month. You guys get that. Yeah, as you need it. Just sort of creating the textures and feelings sometimes that draping fabric will do. I'm getting a little of that phthalo blue over here. And put a thing right into like where her foot is. Grab a little of that very heavily pigmented phthalo blue here. From behind the ankle. This is only possible because the paper's dry now. You can't do this part when the paper's not dry. And so I'm not going to like try to be overly meticulous about the folds because we could be here like literally. Folds are like one of those things that you can get lost in them. You know, lost in somebody's eye? Sure. Lost in the folds for a fact. I want to get lost in some of them. And again, everything you see here, as whatever it is now, will lighten and rest and relax and become more relaxed as we paint. No, just more relaxed as you paint. Misto. You never know what you might see as you're painting along. Now I do want to make sure that I've got a little shadow under her chin, so I'm going to take my Payne's Gray and my blue. Make sure I don't have too much of the pigment on there. So too much, it'll overwhelm. But I do need to put a shadow under the chin. She just would have one. Or I don't want it to be distracting. So that's what the softening was about. I want it there, I just don't want it to be what the whole piece is about. You know, what everything is kind of referring back to. Sometimes it can be nice to come back with a little bit of well-conceived dry line work across the piece. You see how that... Are you starting to see how there's hard edges and soft edges, and we play like, you know, how this is soft, but elements of this are hard, and we're playing with those spaces. putting those there. Like the foot. I think the last playful thing I feel super compelled to do, and I do feel compelled to do, is I'm going to get into my orange again. I'm going to exaggerate, like artists do, elements of what I've got going on. Are there any questions? I'm just you were here, so I hope it's okay if I ask. I appreciate you being here, babe. Thank you. Thank you guys so much for the help. I think sometimes everybody just gets to... Huh? Yeah, I probably did. Hi, Joe. I wonder what Joe thinks of this watercolor. Exaggeration is important. If we're not going to be beholden to reality, right? If we're not, and I mean, even look at it, the hyperrealists, they're almost beholden to something beyond reality, right? Things in reality don't even look that sharp, that dynamic. We don't exist in that space. So even their paintings are something more, like Olympus, or something more, and we have to find space where, each of these little lines, and I love doing this. I'll have to show you like my absolute like dynamic, can't think of anything to paint, can't think of anything to do, how I use watercolor to like calm down. I'm gonna come here on just the right hand side a little bit, the left hand side, and bring a little dark value there. It's just a nice thing that you can do. It kind of creates a glow in the eye. The eyes are really nice. I like them. Now, if you want to do the white reflections like you see me often do, that will have to come in later, either via paint pen or gouache or acrylic. And it does make a huge difference in the final result. Like, it'll make that pop. You can use Frisket as well to hold that white as well. Getting a little bit of that brown there, so it's a little more the first brown I used in the hair. It's just a little bit more seamless. That makes sense. I think we definitely need to have some flyaways here, don't we? Nobody with hair this magnificent and curly possibly get it any place contained without some going where they don't belong. Oh my goodness, guys, I'm so enjoying this. What do you think, John? It's been a long time. I used to do a lot of figure drawing.
Yep. I had my mic off. I think it's great.
Yeah, you have your mic off?
Yep.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I'm talking to you like you're talking to everybody. I didn't know you had your mic off. When we were first dating, art school had a lot of this going on. So there were always like some version of some element of this happening. I'm just adding a bit of yellow just because felt like it. if I take this here and I come in here, what I can do is I can soften. Like, I liked the idea of that hard line at first, but then when I got it there, I was like, it was pulling my eye too much. So I can always come back and go, no. You know what I think? No. There we go. So there's nothing to do. Give it a little sign. So hopefully I will try. I'm going to get her in there in an acrylic at some point. But hopefully this kind of examination of why I picked her, techniques about watercolor, and how to execute her was a helpful little class on a, what day? Is this a Wednesday?
It
On a
is.
Wednesday? I don't know what day it is anymore. You know, my life is crazy when I'm not even stressed about the rose coming up this weekend. That's like the least stressful thing that I've got going on in my life. All right, here she is. I think she's a lovely little story. Elements in her that I very much like are I'm very fond of what's happening at the knees and the blushing there. I do like this on the eyes. A thing that sometimes I will do is come back with an ink that is well tempered like this. I'll show you. I have to put my glasses on. I'll show you a little trick. If you've never seen this. So this is an Edding 05 draw liner. All this means is that this is a small precision pen. And you can do this. People don't realize you can do this with watercolor. I can take this and make that a little more defined in her face. I can also come here, add to the nostrils, and I can come between the lips. And it's such a fine line and it's such a little touch, but you can see that it pops a lot, right? So little things, but I love the little moments that were happening in the hair. I like the little wash. You know, when you're doing fabric folds, and we got the general gist of it, it's nice to be able to slow down and kind of like almost meditate and breathe into the fold where you have, in realistic things, if you're really wanting to capture each one, you got to give yourself almost the entire time we spent on this whole project just for the fabric. And we'll get into that more and more and more as we're going. I like her. We'll definitely put a photograph of her in a group. You are welcome to share your nudes in the Patron group. We can't put them through in Tazo because that's, you know, mixed ages and stuff. But you're welcome to share her in the Patron group. And if you do want to share in Tazo, she'll have to have like a big black privacy bar right here.
Oh yeah, everybody's loving this.
Like a
They thought it was
sticker.
really nice to have a nice evening paint with you. They like that.
Thank you guys so much for the support. I wouldn't be able to do this work I'm doing right now for Acrylic April without the help of everybody here. And I am going to be leaning on y'all even more as we get closer, kind of like for your eyes and your grammar and your spelling and your insights on those things. And just some Patron first look. Just keep sending wishes that I make it between now and the first. I am literally looking forward to the retreat just to like have a day to go around and paint. I'm actually pretty excited about it. That's gonna be like my break right before everything happens in April. Be good to yourself. Seriously, be good to yourself. Be good to each other. And I do want to see you at an easel really soon. Bye.